When Tom arrives home that evening, he carries within him a bubbling stew of negative feelings. Anger, distrust, fear, heartbreak. He knows she can tell that something has changed, but he's not about to tell her about Bridget's call. "What's wrong?" Karen says at last, after an almost silent meal. "That's kind of a silly question, given the circumstances," Tom says coldly. "Maybe I don't like living with the fear of the police showing up on my doorstep to arrest my wife." He hadn't meant to say it. It just slipped out. He watches her face go white. He wants to blame her, tell her that everything is her fault. But instead, he just turns away from her. "You haven't asked about my appointment with the lawyer this morning," she says, equally chilly. He hasn't forgotten about it. He just would prefer not to know. "How'd it go?" he asks, dreading what she might say. "I had to pay him a bigger retainer." Tom gives a bitter laugh. Why am I not surprised? "Would you rather I not have paid him?" she asked sharply. How far their marriage has deteriorated in just a week, Tom thinks. He would never have believed it before. Right now, he wants to pin her up against a wall and yell at her to stop lying to him, to tell him the truth. But he doesn't. Instead, he turns away from her and leaves the room. He can't get past the suspicion that she remembers what happened that night. He can't believe how hurt he is, how manipulated he feels. And yet, he's still in love with her. How much easier all this would be if he wasn't. Bridget sits alone in the dark, her knitting idle on her lap. She hasn't bothered to turn on the lights. Bob is out at a visitation again tonight. That's the funeral business for you. Lots of euphemisms. She knows other women whose husbands are in the business or in the professions who sometimes accompany their husbands to events. They get a new dress, new shoes, but those are dinners and parties and so on, not visitations for grieving families with an open casket at one end of the room and the overpowering scent and sight of flowers everywhere. No, thank you. She's begun to dislike flowers, especially flower arrangements, particularly funeral arrangements. She used to like to get flowers from her husband on their anniversary, but after a few years, she told Bob to please not bother. This was because she began to suspect him of recycling flowers from the funeral home. She didn't actually accuse him of it, and she didn't know for sure, but it seemed like the kind of thing he would do. He's a bit of a cheapskate with the little things. He hadn't balked at the cost of fertility treatments, though. What she would have loved was for him to take her away for a few days, to Venice or Paris, somewhere full of life, away from the funeral business, or whatever it is that keeps him so busy. But he's always insisted that he couldn't stay away for that long. So now she gets an uninspired pair of earrings once a year that she has no occasion to wear. It's not like they can't afford to travel. Crookshank Funeral Homes has expanded, and they now have 3 different funeral homes in Upper New York State, and Bob's busier than ever. But she isn't. She could have worked for Bob in some capacity, but when he suggested it, she said she'd rather stick pins in her eyes. He'd been offended by that. The arduous fertility treatments for which she quit her managerial job hadn't worked. And now, except for her knitting blog, her days are rather empty. She has her hopes pinned on adoption. She worries that Bob's line of work will hurt them in their application. But it's not as if they live in the funeral home. They're a normal couple with a normal home. The business is completely separate. They don't even talk about it much. He knows she hates to hear about it. What really annoys her is that when they were first married... Hold on. Maple! Come here. Maple. Sorry about that. Okay, they're a normal couple with a normal home. The business is completely separate.